Chapter 7. Lascivious, with the most delicate grip, tested Derek's arm. With one palm gently pressing down on his bicep, he used his other hand to raise Derek's arm. There's still some resistance, but he's able to fully curl the limb. "This is good, Derek," Lascivious said as encouragement. "I reckon just a little longer, and the poison will be fully purged from your system. I'd say you're in the clear now." Still, everything kind of hurts," Derek said weakly. "Your body has tightened itself as much as possible against your mind's control." Lascivious explained, letting go of the arm. "I have no doubt that it is absolutely exhausted at this point. Just focus on getting some rest and you'll be back to normal very soon. I promise." "Okay, and thank you," Derek said as he looked towards him with a faint smile. "As I've told your Tiban, I'm always happy to help." Lascivious responded with a wider smile. "And again, I will continue to stay here and keep an eye on you, make sure recovery goes well." "Hey, do you get this often?" Derek asked, returning to looking up at the ceiling, the very act of facing Lascivious aggravating his abused muscles. "This iron bone?" Lascivious let out a sigh as he leaned back in his seat. "Not often, but I won't lie, they definitely make an impression, especially if it was brought about by the whamel. Usually iron bone is caused by dirty objects cutting or puncturing your skin and being left unclean. The whamel, as I'm sure you've witnessed, have somehow made an alchemical recipe that induces the disease." "Haven't you vaccinated people for it?" Derek questioned, glancing his eyes towards Lascivious. Vaccinated?" Lascivious asked in confusion. "What do you mean?" "Never mind," Derek said with resignation, remembering the kind of world he's living in now. "I hear you're from Dinasus, right? What's it like?" "A beautiful place," Lascivious answered, deciding not to press on the strange topic. "One of the few cities that survived the Empire's collapse. I can't even begin to tell you how many souls live there. It's almost endless." "I've heard that before. The Empire." Derek stated his realization. "You said ... IT quote S gone now? When did that happen?" "You've never heard about the Empire and its collapse?" Lascivious asked with slight amazement, wondering how the Redrak never heard of something so commonly known. "I'm, not from around here," Derek stammered, caught off guard. "Obviously," Lascivious muttered before taking in a breath. "Well, let's see. What's the exact number now? It's been quite a few generations since it happened. I'll have to find a librarian to make sure, but I believe it's been 1,000 years since it fell." "1,000 years," Derek repeated with wonder. "That's a long time to keep remembering something, isn't it?" "It would have been lost to the ages were it not for the efforts of Abet and the remains of his college," Lascivious explained. "During the final days of the Empire, Abet and those who stayed with him put everything they had in collecting and protecting any tomes and repositories of what the Empire knew and created. While they couldn't save everything, I think they made the right choice focusing on preserving the written history of the Empire. As amazing as that is, that's not what I meant." Derek sighed, wanting to adjust his posture, but gave up after his body screamed its protest. "Are things so bad that people still wish for something 1,000 years ago? The Empire was the ultimate expression of the golden age our people were at," Lascivious answered. "Nobody was poor. Only to what degree of how rich you are. Abet and his bright students were constantly discovering new things, creating fantastic machines. Seven was always vigilant from the shadows, saving us from threats we'd never knew existed. And if they still marched on us, Scafin would be there with his legions to defend our walls and promptly take the fight to them. The Empire ... IT was virtually unstoppable. Then, what changed?" Derek questioned, his interest piqued. "The Melfolk," Lascivious said with a voice that barely contained hateful resentment. "They were but mere barbarians living in the woods when the Empire existed. One day their envy of us grew too much to bear, so they all attacked us, throwing everything they had at us in an effort to either steal our works or tear us down. Even with steel and magic, victory was never certain. Or rather, we would have won simply by holding out ... if ... IT wasn't for the demons. Uh, demons? Derek couldn't help but turn towards Lascivious, a hesitant curiosity brewing in him. Evil creatures of pure magic. Lascivious leaned a bit further in his seat. Whatever idea or thing that can bring the worst out in anyone, they will use purely to damn them. They came without warning sometime after the Melfolk attacked us, sensing our weakness. Although they attacked the Melfolk as well, they concentrated their hordes against our walls. And when the Empire fell, the Dark Age began. Leaving your home was a danger in of itself. Demons stalked the woods, the roads, everywhere they believed they could find us. Some chose to tear us limb by limb, others, FROM. The stories I would hear, they had darker lusts. Are they still around? Derek inquired, not entirely sure if he truly believes in the idea of actual demons from hell walking the earth. Then again, he still continues to forget that this is not his old life anymore. Anything can happen. Thankfully, about 200 or so years ago, they moved on, Lascivious said after shaking his head. We're not sure why, but the demons migrated from these lands over the Devil's Spine Mountains. Whether the Melfolk are under invasion or attack by them, I and many others do not care. It is a just punishment for their arrogant envy. But that was 1,000 years ago, Derek protested, grunting as he powered through his weakened body to sit up a bit. Surely by this point they've changed, right? And even if not, how can you be sure that the demons don't represent some eternal threat that demands our full attention or something? As cruel and evil as they are a part of nature, Derek. Lascivious sighed after having a moment of worry. Just like the seas, it's a fool's errand to try and rid the world of them. All you can do is try and deal with them the best you can. Derek was silent for a moment. He was still debating whether or not to believe the literal meaning of this. The realist in him is pressuring him to believe that, given what he's seen so far, if magic is indeed a real thing here, then demons surely are also a part of it. But the human in him, the one ripped from his life without warning, is still clinging on to the ideas and understanding of the old world he still possesses. It was then he looked at Lascivious square in the eyes. I don't believe that, he said firmly. There's always a way. We just haven't spent time looking into it. Just because it looks impossible doesn't always mean it is. You haven't studied magic before, have you? Lascivious gave a slight chuckle, not meaning to offend with it. The only way to rid this world of demons is to either destroy the very realm they originate from, or to purge magic itself in its entirety. And trust me, as someone who studied the winds to help people, simply pulling and working with it is not an easy task. It takes many years of study and practice. No, I've never seen magic before, Derek said after another moment of pause, deciding to use a half-truth. Can you show me? While you don't have any broken bones or punctured vitals, I think I see a way. Lascivious grinned. Scooching his chair forward, he let out a huff and then closed his eyes. Gently placing his hands onto Derek's arm, his breathing was deep but steady. Within seconds, a faint glow began to appear around Lascivious's hands. Derek's eyes went wide, his chest leaping into the air as he saw it happen. And as the glow began to grow bright, Derek could feel his arm grow warm. As if he placed a large, icy hot patch there, but it skipped the icy stage. And then Lascivious stopped, pulling himself away with a smirk. Well, it's not much, but how's that for an introduction? Derek stared at him with slack-jawed amazement. Magic? Real? If he went and finds himself a spell book or two, he can actually practice magic. Wait. Derek's amazement quickly melted into disappointment when he remembered what Lascivious said before. It takes years of study and practice just to work with this winds. Lascivious let out some laughter, knowing what was going through Derek's mind without needing to ask. Don't worry, Derek. Everybody learns the hard truth eventually. As glorious and amazing as it is, it requires incredible patience just to even start out. Despite the rewards it can give, not everyone thinks it's worth the journey. That intense, huh? Derek asked, feeling all of the childlike giddiness and excitement promptly escaping him. Some casters who can perform very powerful spells devoted their entire lives just to get to that point. Lascivious nodded. The spell I showed you? It's taken me weeks just to get it down in a consistent manner. In fact, that's really the main trouble. Consistency. It's one thing to muster the focus to cast a spell. It's a completely different battle to cast the spell with the exact same effect over and over. Without study and practice, it can vary wildly. One moment it's very weak, and another it's highly strong. I see, Derek said as he nodded in thought. Well, there goes being a mage or a sorcerer. He supposes that maybe if he can't find anything to do for a living, he can see what it would take to begin studying magic. Though if this continues the trend of being medieval, he's not expecting any sort of financial aid for his studies. Either someone else or he himself has to pay for it completely out of pocket. And he knows for a fact he has absolutely no money to his name. And just off a hunch, he thinks that magic school, or whatever it's called, is no doubt way too expensive for Jörn or nurses to pay for him. Now, it's getting rather late. The sun's already set, Lascivious said as he got up to his feet. In a moment of confusion, Derek, fighting against his exhausted body, looked out the window. Lascivious was right. It was sunset. Almost night, actually. Somehow, Derek completely didn't notice. Hey, Lascivious? Derek spoke up. Yes, he responded, grabbing a copper container of water. If I haven't said it yet, thank you. Derek smiled warmly. Lascivious let out a little chuckle, deciding not to remind him what he said before. You're very welcome, Derek. Derek, Jörn said as he entered the room, beaming with relief. Smiling even wider, Derek attempted to open his arms up, though Jörn stopped him and hugged him close regardless, being mindful of his state. So far so good, Taban, Lascivious stated after Jörn released the temporarily bedridden Redrak. The anti-poison is working as expected. By sunrise, Derek will be completely cured. That doesn't mean he's fully recovered, however. I'm listening, Lascivious. Jörn nodded with understanding, sitting on the bedside. As excellent as it was considering both your quick retrieval of Derek and your messenger's risky travel, he began. Derek still endured Ironbone for no doubt a long while. His body is severely weakened as a result. Don't place any demanding tasks on him. Make sure he gets all the rest he requires. I expect that, say within a week, maybe 2 if needed, he should be back to normal. Understood. Thank you so much for helping him. Jörn nodded again, gently gripping Derek's shoulder. I'll continue to stay for another day. Maybe 2. Lascivious said with a nod, sipping from his container. If Derek continues to make an excellent recovery, I won't be needed here anymore. Again, just make sure he gets rest and to not expect any demanding errands of him. Of course. Would you like to retire to your room? Jörn offered with a smile. Lascivious had several moments of internal conflict before he gave his answer. I suppose ... IT quote S fine now, but promise that if you detect anything odd with Derek, anything, come get me right away. Of course I will, Jörn chuckled reassuringly. Have a pleasant night, Lascivious. You as well, both of you, Lascivious replied warmly, already making his way out. Once he was gone, Jörn let out a heavy sigh and allowed himself to fall onto the bed, then facing to Derek. I won't lie, that was quite the fright there, he began softly. When I heard Cenarax call out that Wamel, I don't think I've ever felt such dread before. First time meeting one, Derek said, slowly returning to his original position, the very memory introducing cold shivers to his body. When I was down, he didn't even look at me as a person, just a commodity. Said that I was a rare one, worth enough for him to get a nice place on the coast. Jörn let out a growling exhale of some kind. Derek could feel the muscles in his arm clenching tight in response. And there was that smell again, in addition to what must be his unique body odor, not the kind neckbeards would have. There's this very odd smell that changes based off their emotion. Derek read somewhere that a rat's sense of smell is so powerful they can literally smell emotions. Is this it? The Melfolk have always hated us since the dawn of time, Jörn began, his voice carrying barely restrained hatred. For as long as we could remember, they always fought us. never spoke to us. Not once have they ever come to us with an offer of peace, or even a temporary halt to fighting. They always view us as an inferior race. First the damn empire, trying to tear it down, then summoning the demons on us when we proved too powerful even for their cowardly alliance. And now, summoning? Derek questioned, thinking it was better to stop his train of thought. I heard the demons came as a surprise, both to us and the, Melfolk, right? Jern sighed again. Yeah, some people out in the city, where they had walls and ever-present guards to protect them. They think that way. But because they've never experienced the depravity of the Melfolk, they'll never understand the truth. The demons are drawn to evil, to corruption. And the Melfolk, they're absolutely full of evil. What else can explain such savagery they inflict us? What that Wamel was about to do to you? Yeah, you're absolutely sure they'll never talk to us? Derek questioned, feeling his throat close up a little. Well, the Hamel are considered the odd ones, Jern said after a moment of thinking. They just can't make up their minds. Do they want to be friends with us, or make us mere practice for their blades? Do they worship this Athel creature, or don't they? What can you tell me about them? Derek asked curiously. Apparently they are the direct and closest descendants to the Prommel race. Jern began with a tone that implies indifference. Where the other Melfolk seems to have changed in the generations since they came to this world, the Hamel continues to look just like the Prommel, if their old statues and art are to go by anything. And the Hamel are extremely proud of it. I hear rumors from passing traders that the Hamel are undergoing some changes when they realize that. Derek's heart stopped. If what he says is true, then there are humans left. That must mean this isn't a completely different world. It's still Earth. Some number of humans survived what he experienced and have rebuilt civilization, or at least a part of it. What do you mean by changes? Derek continued, now obsessed with the humans who are called Hamels. They seem to be splitting apart, Jern continued, seemingly oblivious to the sudden change in Derek's demeanor. Western Swabia is treating it more a source of pride or evidence of their status amongst the Melfolk. Eastern Swabia, on the other hand, thinks that the Hamels have lost their way and would be utterly disappointed if they were to see what's become of them. Derek didn't like what he was implying. Such as? Honestly? Jern began with a shrug. The only thing of importance to me is how they think the Promel treated the Drakfolk of their time. Somewhere far west of Swabia, they found an old city, and in there they dug up a Prommel holding what looks to be an early Woodrak. That's making them think that the Prommel people treated Drakfolk as close friends. Eastern Swabia's trying to take after that. The others? As testament to their primitive barbarity, they're already trying to come up with alternative explanations. The Demel in particular are really keen on the idea that the Promel was just bringing a valued slave into the afterlife, so he wouldn't suffer demeaning errands. That made Derek think. Remembering what he experienced, it was extremely sudden. In the blink of an eye, based on what Jern said, if that human was holding their pet as some kind of final goodbye or an instinctual attempt at protection, that means they've had some kind of warning. They saw it coming, unlike him. Whatever it was that ended the world, or rather ended his civilization, he must have been practically right next to the epicenter. But that also raises a question that, although he's never thought about, he's now obsessed with. Now that he knows this is still the same Earth he's lived on, where the fuck is he? He's seen nothing familiar around his home. Hell, is it even the same after all this time? Is he still in America? Or is he in Africa or Asia? Are the continents even the same after who knows how long since human civilization was ended? And now that he's thought about what's familiar or not, he remembers. Scarface, Splinter, and Albert. All the memories rushing back into him like a flood. The first time he saw them when he went into Petco, when they warmed up to him, started climbing on him and looking happy when he came into the room. Derek, you all right? Jern broke him out of his thoughts. Derek stammered for a few moments before he could answer. Yeah, just thinking is all. Would you like to tell me? Jern asked softly, twisting to face Derek. Whatever you were thinking about, it's bringing you down a fair bit. Derek knew it was going to happen eventually, whether it's a direct question or something that led to it. He fucked up, made everyone think he was a poor, abused boy. But can he actually tell him? Will Yearn, just another guy trying his best to carve out a decent living? Will he believe that Derek is a former Pramel who was ripped out of some undead afterlife by a Batwoman necromancer and transplanted into a Redrak body because the same necromancer thought he was someone she was looking for? Yearn, two things. Derek sighed after intense internal debate. One, I want to say I'm sorry for how I made you feel. I'm not from around here. What you were doing, well, I've never seen that before, so ... IT kind of caught me off guard. I should have given you a chance, and I'm sorry I didn't. Us, you've already forgiven me, Derek, but still, thank you. Yearn smiled with relieved gratitude, glad to officially hear it. And second, I was thinking about my best friends. Derek answered with some hesitance. He had to come up with something. He's not going for the transplanted Pramel route, but he just had to talk to someone. So he started weaving his story together the best he could for each passing moment. We grew up together. Scarface, Splinter, Albert. We did everything together. Always spent time with each other. Talked a lot. Everything. Then, I think we were attacked. I was alone in my room when all of a sudden I could hear screaming, could smell fire. When I went out, the village was burning. People were dying. I found my friends, and even though Scarface wanted to stay and fight, we decided it was better to run. We ran as far as we could until we got to a river. Scarface led the way over a fallen tree that was our bridge. I was in the back. When we got to the middle, a lightning strike came out of nowhere and hit me. I don't know how, but Scarface caught my leg. They were trying to pull me up when the tree bent a bit. It made Scarface lose his grip, and I fell into the river. I can still hear Albert screaming my name, even now. Yearn immediately reached out his hand and rubbed Derek's eye. He never even realized he started crying. Soon after, Yearn wrapped Derek in a deep, close embrace. That's when that witch found you, wasn't it? Yearn asked. Took you away, tried to use you for her demonic ritual. Right. Derek couldn't say a word, so he nodded. So then, you were not taken advantage of then? Yearn then questioned after several moments of thought. You're simply a foreigner who lost his dear friends? Is that it? Derek nodded again. It wasn't perfect. Hell, he's already seeing holes in it. But considering his alternative, it was the best he could come up with for now. He'll just have to pray that Yearn will buy it. Well, on the one hand, I am glad that you didn't grow up to be used, Yearn commented with a reserved smile. On the other, though, you still had to endure tragedy. Tell me, was it the Ormal who attacked? I don't know. I never saw anyone besides my friends. Derek answered with a little shrug. Who are they? The savagery and barbarity of the Mel folk, but without any restraint. Yearn sighed. Every day they spend seeking to fight. Peace is a foreign concept to them. They listen only to strength. I don't know beyond the Devil's Spine, but the ones we see have made their home in the mountains there. They would have come and attacked us, enslaved us and burned our homes if it wasn't for the Crimson Redrak who launches attacks against them. Derek couldn't help but let out a huff as the reality of this new world slowly started to dawn on him. What a life this is, huh? Fear of being skinned or enslaved by the Melfolk. Demons running around doing who knows what. That it is, lad, Yearn nodded somberly. We do what we can, though. This is the world we live in. We just have to do our best a day at a time. Derek allowed himself to think on this for a while, processing what he heard. He then looked back to Yearn. Are you absolutely sure that with the exception of the Hamel, the Melfolk will have zero desire to be at peace with us? The Ayam will harvest the Drak for their furs, the Damel locks them up deep in their minds to get their precious metals, Yearn began, his hatred soon rising. Nobody knows what the blood-obsessed Gumel does with us, or the Samel far to the north. The Wamel treats us like game, selling our furs and eating our remains as food. I'm sorry, but even if they do want it, what kind of man in his right mind would desire peace with such monsters? So then, only the Hamel would tolerate us? Derek asked, his hope rapidly deflating. As I've said, they can't make up their minds. Jörn sighed, one expelling all of his swelling anger. Nobody knows what they'll do. If you ever see a Hamel, you keep all eyes on them. Just as likely to kill as they would be your friend. Trust only a Drake. Okay, Derek said with a nod in acknowledgement. Looks like this isn't a world built on rainbows and love. Because of his new existence as a rat, or a redrak, he has to worry about the humans and supposedly sibling races, the Melfolk, wanting to enslave or skin him. And that's on top of worrying about actual evil demons running around and doing who knows what. And as he took in all of that, he suddenly felt even more alone, unsafe than he did when he first arrived here. Derek's human side can't believe he's actually going to say this. Hey, Jörn, can you sleep with me tonight? Jörn nodded with a smile. Of course, lad. You've been through enough as it is. You deserve to at least have one night of a friend's company. Thank you, Derek said meekly, dealing with a mixture of both gratitude and coming to terms with what he just asked of him. Moseon, Kingdom of Swabia. Unter Kaiser Alfric II sighed as he leaned against the railing of the balcony, eyes fixated on the moon in full glow in the sky. It was getting close to deep night, but he reckons that he won't have a good sleep this night. Ardor has voiced his displeasure at Alfric's handling of the raids, launched on ammo caravans containing freshly caught dragfolk by Wamel hunting parties. The backward simpleton is expecting Alfric to draw his sword and threaten the raiders to stop under penalty of death. Typical Westerner. Regardless, he has Ardor breathing down his neck now. It won't be long before Ardor feels compelled to take personal involvement in the matter. Alfric will need to figure something out, quick. The Eastern Lords won't be happy at all when they hear that Ardor is overriding his authority in an attempt to stop the raids. While Alfric doesn't believe that the Lords will overstep themselves or undermine his own authority, he does believe that it will only add further credence to the idea that continuing to live under Ardor's rule is a fool's dream. Lord Alfric, correct? A rather composed male voice grabbed his attention. He felt a quick twinge of indignation, but quickly suppressed it. No doubt a Western noble. Preparing himself, Alfric turned around and, as expected, met a highborn from Western Swabia. A rather light-skinned Hamel, with hair the color of the sun and a clear sky that flowed down to his shoulders. As further testament to their inwards arrogance, the highborn's well-made clothes were covered in regal embroidery and jewelry, all in an attempt to construct the image of a Hamel in a superior station of life. I am indeed. May I know your name, good sir? Alfric responded, already turning on his diplomatic voice. I am Jean, Duke of Suzapagna, Count of Chambard, and a member of the King's Royal Court. The highborn introduced himself with all of the theatrics expected of one. It's a pleasure to finally meet you, Lord Alfric. I've come with honest curiosity. Why do you hold such misplaced love for those beasts? Alfric knew where this was going. Surely you've heard about Klaus and Jon? The Promel with his Woodrock out in the old Promel city, far west of Swabia, correct? Is that what you're calling them? Jean sighed with unrestrained disgust. The proper name is Louis and Pierre. And yes, I am well aware of the discovery. A Promel ensuring that his beloved servant accompanies him to the ether to continue the privilege of serving his lord and master. That's not what it looked like, Duke Jean, Alfric countered, quelling his rising frustration. It looked more like the Promel was attempting to protect a beloved and dear friend, was it not? Why would the Promel reduce themselves to thinking the Protodracs are worthy of kinship? Jean shrugged with callous indifference. If anything, they are even more primitive and unintelligent than today's races. What would the Promel gain from them if not servitude? As I've mentioned, kinship, Duke Jean. Alfric glared some, nearly forgetting to include the highborn's title. They had each other, did they not? Jean shrugged once more. I am not entirely sure what's become of you Easterners, but it is proven beyond any reasonable doubt that the Promel has taken those Protodracs as servants, not as friends or companions. Oh? Proven by who? Alfric challenged, crossing his arms. Men and women of more stable minds than your ilk. Jaunt answered with a voice of venom. I wonder, your people are strangely safe from the demons. What possible reason could that be? Because we don't offer ourselves to the demons like your kind do, Alfric responded, his patience growing thin. I was hoping we could have a civil conversation, Duke, but it seems you've forgotten how to do so. For both of our sakes, let us part ways. H.M. Schwenning glared down the Unterkaiser fiercely for several moments before finally nodding. Agreed. I did come to try and seek understanding how the Eastern mind works. Alas, it is just as foreign and inscrutable as we believe it to be. Farewell, Lord. With a polite, shallow bow, Alfric silently gave his farewell as well. Jaunt promptly spun on his heels and walked away, back inside the main ballroom where the gathering is taking place. Thinking that he has spent too much time outside, Alfric, after giving time to allow distance, then returned to the main gathering, where the chamber musicians were providing music in their special alcove of the Grand Hall. Highborn and notables, most noticeably from the West, mingled, chatted, and celebrated wherever there was space. Interspersed among the attendants were the servants, mainly dragfolk, who carried an assortment of food and drink to be selected at the partygoers' leisure. And as Alfric periodically would witness, some of the attendants' idea of fun was to torture the dragfolk. Sometimes it would just be tripping them. Other times it would be much more direct, with a lady flicking her drink upon their faces at what she believed was an unspoken slight against her. Tonight was supposed to be the celebration of Athel Day, the hero saint of all of Hamelkind, who single-handedly drove away the demons infesting what soon became Swabian lands. The progenitor of the order, whose Grand Master was descended from Athel's child. Always ever arrogant, the Western dynasty of the Swabian royalty will always claim that they too bear the blood of Athel. What they'll never allow to be spoken was that this is only because they were descended from a bastard of Athel. Alfric grinned to himself. The Westerners are so desperate to obtain even a fraction of Athel's glory that they'll do anything to maintain such delusion, the root of their very vain and barbaric culture. A drink, sir? A woodrak asked him, expertly carrying the obscenely regal plate that contained carefully arranged goblets of wine, pressed and aged from the Camberoo region. I would like one, thank you. Alfric nodded, carefully taking the silver goblet. Every conceivable thing in a Westerner's life was made to project regality, designed such that it was far above a commoner, fit only for the highborn and royalty. Alfric noticed the quick look of anxiety within the woodrak's eyes when he moved his hand. His heartstrings were plucked. This one must have been dealing with far too many Westerners who mocked and brought their joy at his expense. I'm from the East. You have no need to fear me, Alfric assured him softly. If possible, you'll have a much better life there. Unlike these savages pretending to be civilized people, we know how the Promel truly viewed you. We aim to continue that tradition. The woodrak servant had a moment of weakness. How long was he suffering at the deprivations of these creatures? Thank you, sir. I'll take that into consideration. With a nod from Alfric, the woodrak returned to his rounds. Sighing some, Alfric found a new spot and proceeded to sip from his goblet. Sometimes he wonders if it truly is worthwhile to make a move for independence. Each time he visits the West, he's constantly reminded of the monstrosity that his people silently assent to, reminded just how ... incompatible the two peoples are. Perhaps his son was correct after all? The future of the Easterners, no, the future of the Teuton people, lies in finally separating themselves. Then the hall began to spin. Alfric could feel his arms growing weak, his stomach rebelling him. Barely standing up, he only made a few steps before he let loose his drink and food onto the floor, collapsing down shortly afterwards. By Athel, is he okay? One of the highborn exclaimed. Can't hold his drink, can he? Another chuckled. It was only until one of the guardsmen came over and checked him that he officially made clear what was happening. The Unterkaiser has been poisoned. Lock down the hall now. The air fell silent, many of the highborn gasping in absolute terror, already casting suspicious eyes, regrettably towards their rivals. Artur barreled through the crowd and knelt down beside the expired Unterkaiser. Outwardly, it's as if he was unaffected, coming by to see for himself. Inwardly, however, he was livid. He knew what was going to happen, what this disaster was about to unleash. The Wudrak who served the Unterkaiser his drink was already taken away, screaming and begging his innocence. The highborn already began to murmur and whisper to each other, desperately determining with words who has done the deed. And Artur was leaving the hall, already formulating a plan. Ganor was startled out of his slumber by the rapid, harsh banging on his door. Thinking something was happening, he immediately retrieved his sword and made for the door. "What is it?" he demanded, finding the Kriegskommandeur, Richtof, with a grim expression. "It's Alfric, sir," the aged Hamel began, his voice heavy. Ganor's heart dropped to the floor, feeling terror overtake him. "What about him? Is he okay?" Ganor said with a raised voice. No, not the Kronprinz, the Unterkaiser," he explained quickly after a stammer. "We've just received an urgent message. He's dead, Ganor. Assassinated." For a moment, Ganor felt numb. The Unterkaiser was the man who rescued him, took him in and introduced him to the Kronprinz. But only for a moment. Ganor quickly grew worried about his close friend. "Where is Alfric, the Kronprinz?" Ganor asked in a soft voice, setting aside his blade. "On the throne," Richtof said simply, promptly stepping aside. Ganor wasted no time, already dashing through the halls towards the main throne room. Richtof followed closely. Barging through the doors, Ganor found Alfric III where he was told he'd be. Alfric was slumped in the throne, head buried in his hand, unmoving, staring at the ground. Beside him was Klaus, Chancellor of the Court. Upon sighting them, Klaus quietly made his way over to them, his face dark and grim. I've just informed the Kronprinz." Shoving the Chancellor aside, Ganor rushed to his side, already trying to comfort and console his friend. Alfric was unresponsive, continually staring at the ground, the shimmer of where his tears ran, betraying his inner turmoil. "Klaus," Richtof said quietly, gently pulling the Chancellor to him by the arm. "Find the court. Tell them to assemble. And if they don't already know, tell them. Let's give the boy time to grieve. He needs it." "Agreed, Kommandeur." Klaus nodded, already setting off for the search. Chapter 8. The light of the big shiny in the sky awoke Hagrim. Letting out a deep groan as he stretched, he gave a grunt as the injuries of his duel with Yag ached. He didn't care, today was the day, and he's not letting anything stop him. Scratching the itches on his face, he exited his boss tent and greeted his new boys. "Looks like nobody killed each other while he wasn't looking. Good. The more boys he has, the better. Tora," Hagrim spoke firmly once he spotted his second, who immediately stood to attention. "Spread the word, it's time. We's heading down to the ready camps for the best smashing ever." "Right, boss," Tora grinned widely, already rushing to it. Hagrim could feel it. The need to smash, to kill. It's rising, but above all else, he's about to smack the gob out of that blood-covered Reddy for all the mocking he's been doing to him. If that Reddy thinks he's so tough that he can walk around saying what he wants, Hagrim's going to challenge that. If he really is that tough, it'd be really simple for him to stop Hagrim from smashing his things. He can also feel it from his boys. The air. It's one of those things you just know. Walking through the air, you can tell it's different. Hard to place, but very obvious. Why not rile them up a bit? That'll make things fun after all. Finding the tallest wooden platform he could find, he let out a bellowing roar to call attention. Everybody within the new Ironhead Boys camp all turned to him, knowing he's about to say something. "All right, boys, this is it," Hagrim declared with a wide, bloodthirsty grin, his still, if faintly red from the blood of Yag. "I knows you all heard about the blood-covered Reddy. What he's been doing, how tough he is. Makes you wonder, though, he's good at fighting. We can't lie about that. But is he even a good boss? If we decide to take a stroll down to his camp, smash up a few things and take his shinies, is he tough enough to keep his boys together?" The Ironhead Boys, too, voiced their curiosity at such a question, some of them growing excited at the prospect of fighting. That's what we're doing, Hagrim said, thrusting his smasha into the air. Now we's marching on down to his camps, where the rest of the Reddies are. We's gonna smash 'em up proper, take some boys and girls, but obviously they're shinies too. That Reddy thinks he's so tough when fighting us in our own camps. Let's see how he does when we takes the fight to his own camps. The Ironhead boys let loose a cheer, their appetite for slaughter once again whetted. I'll warn all of yous, though, Hagrim interrupted. It's a fair bit of walking that. If things go according to plan, I reckon we'll be there after the big shiny in the sky woke up about a few times. But I promise all of yous, stick with it, and we'll be rolling in shinies more so than we could possibly know what to do with. Have so much Reddies to play with, you'll actually have to work hard just to go through 'em. The Ironhead boys went into a frenzy, now demanding the order to be given to march. Hagrim let out a prideful laugh. With one ear-splitting roar, he gave the order to advance. And in one fluid, if chaotic motion, the Ironhead boys grabbed their smashas, slashes, and cuttas and filed out of the fortified camp. Within a few days' time, the Redrak villages closest to the Devil's Spine Mountains will experience the green tide of Ormals. Parnax's village. Finally, Derek knew sleep. Every time he tried when he had tetanus, or iron bone, as the local Redrak called it, he just couldn't stay asleep. He always woke up, panicked as he was having a nightmare, only to learn it was his reality. And that pain. By God, never in his entire life had he ever endured such pain brought about by the poison. It was as if he was burning alive from the inside. He swears that he even felt several of his muscles snap from the constant clenching. Now, however, it's gone. Now it's just a dull, deep, and intense ache that he'll have to deal with for a few days. But at least he's finally getting better. Waking up, he found Jörn beside him, close but not enough to be considered provocative. It was strange. Having been an only child and never having gone out attempting to get a date, this was probably the most affection he's ever received. As is the case, since he's still acclimating, he felt uncomfortable and awkward. But compared to when Jörn first tried it, it's receding quite a bit. Now, after a brief moment, he felt something else. The comforting warmth of someone who cares for him, even if it isn't romantic or sexual. He couldn't help but let out a wide smile. Because of this, he realized that he desperately craved for affection. He just didn't know it before. Giving in, Derek nestled somewhat against Jörn. Could this be a holdover from the rats of his time? They were a highly communal species, living packed together, where dogs and cats, depending on the owner, would get their very own bed all to themselves. Rats would sleep with each other grouped up. Maybe the rats that stayed on Earth when they evolved or even mutated, they carried on some of those experiences and formed them as a distinct part of their culture. Even then, Derek doesn't think he'll mind all that much, especially if it all will make him all warm and fuzzy like he feels now. Perhaps that's just the affection-starved person in him. He had friends, yeah, but they didn't last long. Some moved out, others just drifted apart. He got used to being on his own, sometimes even thought it was for the better, after experiencing how exhausted he would feel just going out and talking to people. Looks like you slept okay, HM, Jörn said softly, then rubbing Derek's back. And it also seems you're adjusting well to the idea of someone watching over you during the night. Derek let out a little sigh. Never really experienced something like this. It's still weird to me, but I think it's growing on me. That's good, ... I quote, "S a thing everyone here does, not just in Parnax." Jörn smiled, patting Derek. There's no better comfort than the idea that someone is right next to you if you're in trouble, yeah? With the world we're in? Yeah. Derek nodded, while his mind still wandered onto just how easy it was for other things to happen. Probably the source of why it still bothers him to some degree. The idea that it was done solely because the person truly does care for you does speak to him. He's actually even considering making such an offer sometime into the future if he feels the need to. Well, Jörn said as he stretched, letting out a groan as he did. Time for breakfast, and then seeing what today brings us. Let me help. Jörn offered his hand after he got out of the bed. Derek gripped it and then leaned on Jörn once he too was out of bed. Although it wasn't truly pain, the best way he can describe how he's feeling is if he went extremely hardcore into every kind of exercise imaginable, doing it to the extent he probably would have dropped dead. Still, learning about the world still occupies his mind. How he had to endure an entire day and night just to see some kind of doctor, learning the dangers that infested the land outside the village. He didn't like it. It just made him miss his old world all the more. It made him miss his best friends, his former pet rats. And just like how one person would snap under stress, he felt a snap of determination. He doesn't know what he's going to do or how he'll do it, but he just can't stand the idea of living in a world like this. It has to change. And if he can do it in a way that brings back what humans have made, even better. And with that, he quickly found out what his first step was. Get an idea of what age the world is at. He spotted copper being used in addition to heavy usage of stone, though by appearance they weren't crudely cut. There was refinement to them. Could he be in the Bronze Age of some sort? Maybe even the Iron Age? He needs to know. Excuse me, Lascivious exclaimed when the two left the room. Derek needs to be resting. What are you doing? A man needs to eat, right? Jörn responded with a grin. I'm just giving him breakfast. If you really think so, I'll bring him right back. I happen to have a clean copper tray on hand, Tiban, Lascivious said with an unamused tone. Derek, if you'd tell me what you'd like, I can bring you breakfast in bed. No preference. Derek shrugged after a moment of pause, but then had a slight worry. Wait, does that mean I have to stay in bed all day? That is resting, yes. Lascivious nodded. What? What am I supposed to do then? Derek exclaimed. What can I do in bed? I can think of a few things, Jörn said casually with a shrug. Derek slowly gazed over to Jörn, immediately catching what he was implying. All that did was make Jörn laugh. We can always talk, Derek, Lascivious said with some offense. I know we can, but an entire day, Derek countered. Do you really want to talk for an entire full day? Come on, Lascivious, Jörn joined in. I'm not going to make him work the fields or anything like that. I'll help him around, keep him away from doing anything too intense. Lascivious's face tensed with frustrated disappointment and internal debate. After several moments, he let out a defeated sigh. Fine. As much as I don't like the idea, I can't force you. Just promise me you'll make sure to let his body fix itself properly. Hey, don't get me wrong, Lascivious, Derek said with a hand raised defensively. I know how bad it was. I'm not interested in having a reminder about it for the rest of my life. I won't overdo anything, I promise. Lascivious let another sigh. All right, but I will still remain here for, say, a couple days. If something happens, even if it's something I warned you about, please find me right away. We promise. Jörn nodded, then proceeded to help Derek over to the table. Lascivious returned to his room, berating himself for what could be a very bad mistake on his part. At the table, Jörn already set out the food from the cupboard along the wall. There were 2 large copper plates set down first. The first contained a variety of fruit. Derek could see apples, grapes, pears, even an orange or two. The second plate had evenly sliced bread. After the plates came 3 containers, also copper. Watching Jörn, he saw that the most basic looking of the containers had water in it. Maybe the other 2 were condiments. Go ahead, take what looks good to you, Jörn offered, already filling up his own plate. Although Derek was slightly disappointed there was no meat, he won't complain. After taking several grapes, a couple of apples, and an orange, finishing with a good amount of sliced bread, he then filled up his cup of water and began dining with Jörn. So, Derek, Jörn began after finishing a grape, if it's not too much trouble, what are your friends like? Scarface and the others? Derek munched on his apple as he thought for a bit, needing to present it in a different way since it'll reveal his primal origin otherwise. Well, I'll tell you this. Scarface has one hell of a temper. I remember one time he got this new toy from a trader that came by. He really loved it. One day, though, when I came home, where we usually spend time together, I heard a pretty nasty fight going on. Turns out Splinter's been wanting a turn with the toy for a while, and Scarface wouldn't let him. So when Splinter went and took the toy, trying to play with it on his own, Scarface found him and just started really going at him. I actually thought he was going to hurt him there. Has Scarface's mother never taught him how to be nice to others? Jern asked with some shock. Derek was silent for a moment, both in altering his answer as well as what the memory brought out in him. Let's just say they don't exactly have the best relationship. Ah, I see. Jern nodded in understanding. What about his father? He ran when he learned that Scarface's mother was pregnant. Derek stammered a bit. Or so I've heard. Jern was silent. Derek could smell the change in his scent again. Was that anger? He can't remember. Within a short time, Jern then said, I won't dig deeper then. Now that I've mentioned him, Splinter, Derek continued, he's always been a quiet person. I mean, he's not like planning any ill deeds or anything. It's just, he's a little hard to know at times. Never makes it easy to know what he's thinking. Doesn't help that he just runs off and disappears for a bit too. Sometimes I wonder if he just likes being alone. And what about his family? Do you know what it's like there? Jern questioned. Derek felt a little odd about his strange interest in their families. Or perhaps it was the fact Ern was really making him work his imagination. You know, I actually don't know. Never heard anything, and Splinter always gets quiet, or rather, quieter, when it's brought up. I think it's safe to assume it's also a, well, bad situation. Jern leaned back in his seat, almost studying Derek. All right, and Albert, was it? What was he like? Albert, he's always been, for a lack of a better word, close to me. Derek answered, a little unnerved by Jern's change in behavior. Where Scarface and Splinter want to do their own thing time to time, Albert wants to do everything with me. Always asks me to come along with his thing, or asks if I want him along, that kind of thing. And let me guess, trouble at home as well? Jern asked, attempting to predict the answer. Derek gulped a little bit. He wasn't sure how to take that. On the one hand, he's not seeing any sign that Jern is picking up who he truly is. On the other hand, he's not exactly liking at how predictable he's becoming. But he is telling the truth, just presenting it differently. Or rather, the truth that he knows. When Derek went and got them, Scarface was almost killed by his mother rejecting him, giving him a rather nasty scar across his face, which led to his name. Albert and Splinter, on the other hand, they seem to have had relatively normal upbringings. Splinter got his name because he reminded Derek of the same character from Ninja Turtles, as well as later proving to be a rather sneaky rat. Albert got his name because Derek discovered he was unusually smart, and Albert Einstein was what popped into his mind. Derek decided to just go for it. Yeah, if I remember right, his parents are there, just not, like, they're there, but not really. Does that make sense? Jern slowly nodded after a few moments. Yeah, I understand. They never gave him the attention he needed, right? Derek nodded back. Yeah, so I guess that explains why he was so clingy. Jern stared at Derek for several more moments, continuing his study. Derek felt like he just realized he was under interrogation rather than having a nice breakfast chat. So all three of your friends had troubling upbringings, Jern began, resting his arms on the table. What about you? Derek thinks this one didn't need a lot of work. Just have to remember to not say anything that sounds Pramel. Honestly, looking back, I actually had a good life. Mom and Dad were there. They did the best they could with what they had. We weren't rich, but we weren't poor either. And as much as they were worried about what kind of friends I was having, they never really stepped in and controlled me. I'd say they were pretty good parents. They didn't have everything, didn't know the answer to every single question, but they tried. Jern nodded in thought as he listened and then spoke. They did good, Derek. I can hear the sincerity in your words. For young boys and girls, it's easy to just ignore and walk away from other kids when they cause trouble, like you say Scarface would. But you didn't. If I may, why were you friends with them? Weren't you worried that they would cause trouble? or damage either yours or your parents' reputation. This time, Derek didn't even take the time to think. Something in him compelled him to speak. Because nobody deserves to be alone. It's not their fault that they were born to some shitty people. Why should they be punished for it? I honestly don't know if I was ever considered a real friend to them, but if just me being there is enough to make them feel happy, or that someone actually wanted them or cared for them, I'd consider that well worth whatever trouble they would cause. Jörn seems to be taken aback by those words, leaning in his seat as he slowly started to smile. You're a good person, Derek. You have a soul that's relatively rare these days. I knew I saw something like that when we first met. You did you? Derek replied with a wry grin. When he moved to get another apple, his exhausted muscles screamed out their protest, causing him to grunt some. Ah, even sitting is hell, man. I know that feeling, Jörn commented dryly, munching another grape. Derek's gaze snapped to Jörn, completely surprised as well as feeling the growing suspicion. What, you mean you were poisoned before too? Derek asked, not entirely sure if he wants to go straight to the subject. No, thankfully. Jörn shook his head, then giving a nervous smile. I used to be sweet on someone in Denisas before I was Taban. Pretty thing he was. A little rough, but your soul reminded me of his. Derek clammed up. So his suspicions were true then. You were sweet on a man? Yes, Jörn answered with a little confusion. Why? Is there a problem? Oh no, not at all, Derek said quickly, surprised at the candidness. Maybe it was mostly from his preconceived expectations of a possible Bronze Age world. I thought different is all. You mean you thought I was more into women? Jörn asked, his nervous smile now one of playfulness. While I'm sure there are many fine, beautiful women here and elsewhere, they just never caught my eye like men do. I gotcha. Derek nodded, wondering where the conversation is going to go now. He got his clue. Jörn was eyeing him a bit, looking rather nervous. Hopeful even? If Derek could sweat, he'd be letting loose bullets right now. He's not exactly certain he wants to go where this may be heading. What about you, Derek? Jörn asked the question Derek dreaded. What kind of person catches your eye? Derek was at a complete mental standstill. No words of any kind were coming to him. He can't even work out where he stands to give an answer. Do you not know? Jörn questioned with a little confusion. When you were growing up, was it a man or a woman who you've started thinking about quite a bit? Don't know. Derek shrugged as he stammered, having made no progress in freeing his mental lockdown, just blabbering words at this point. Nobody? Nobody. Really? Jörn repeated with shock. No, beautiful Tybin's daughter? Or a well-built, hard-working man out in the fields? No, nobody, Derek confirmed, wanting this conversation over with already. Now that's finally making progress. He's realizing the core of his anxiety is depending on his answer. How things will change between him and Jörn in the coming days. He doesn't even know if Jörn is considered old or not in this world. How old are you, Jörn? Derek blurted out what he was thinking. And instantly after uttering it, Derek died inside. He did not mean to ask that at all. Jörn didn't seem to take offense. If anything, he looked flattered. I'm only 26, Derek, so Jörn is only 2 years older than him. At least there's that. Still, though, not registering the intense burn of his muscles, he immediately clutched his head, desperate to hide from this conversation. Can we talk about something else, please? Sure. Yeah. Jörn nodded, taken back by Derek's behavior, though he did end up grinning a second after. How do you like your men? Strong and silent. Jörn, I'll actually kill you. Derek warned out of desperation, slapping his hands onto the table. Please change the subject. Something far away from this. Oh, come now, Derek. Jörn laughed deeply from the warning. I'm sure even Lycidius can smell your scent right now. What? Am I not clean or? Derek stammered, already starting to sniff his pits. Amazingly, he's not smelling any bad body odor from them, though he did get to know what his normal smell is. No, not that, Jörn laughed even more, then leaning over the table some as he grinned. I mean, I can smell how much you're actually enjoying this. Have I helped you learn something? Derek was confused for a moment, but then he realized, if rats can smell emotions, what's stopping them from smelling arousal too? Derek definitely isn't feeling any physical arousal right now. Not like he could given how awkward everything feels, but the moment he realized it, he knew he's done. Derek let out a heavy sigh, feeling all of the built-up anxiety and tension melt away from his body when he accepted his fate. Okay, so maybe I had some questions when I grew up and, well, nobody seemed to want to answer them. Or maybe I was too afraid to ask those questions. Why were you afraid? Jaunt asked with concern. Wherever you're from, do they not particularly care much for those who are attracted to like-bodied people? I guess you can sort of say that. Derek nodded. I mean, last I remember, we were on the way to being more accepting of such a thing, but, well, there's still some influential groups who keeps resisting it. I wonder, were you from anywhere in the Melfolk territories? Jaunt questioned. As is the case for those savages, they have some very strange worldviews. From what you're saying, it sounds like maybe you're from a small Redrag village or hamlet somewhere in Swabia. As I'm sure I've said many, many times before, the Hamels can't make up their minds, so I wouldn't be surprised if that's where you're from. Sure? Derek shrugged, knowing Jaunt isn't going to let up in wanting to know him. But that also means he'll have to act like he actually grew up there. I mean, I've never seen them around or heard my village talk about them a lot, so not sure what difference that would make. Then depending where your village was exactly, Jaunt spoke as he thought, if you were closer to the Devil's Spine Mountains, then it was the Ormo who burned your village. If not, then it must be the Western Swabians who did it. Hey, your guess is as good as mine, all right? Derek said as he took some of his bread. Like I said, I saw nobody else except my friends. Could be anyone. Well, regardless, let me tell you this, Derek, Jaunt said, getting up from his seat. Jaunt? Derek asked, the dread overtaking him once more, closely watching him round the table and approach him, then kneeling. You'll never be afraid when you're with us, Jaunt said softly, resting his hands on Derek's cheeks. Just like the Empire, we don't concern ourselves with such petty nonsense. It makes no difference whether you love men or women. Trust me, I wouldn't be here if that wasn't true. Okay, good to know, man. Derek stammered again, wondering what exactly Jaunt is going to do. Jaunt held him for a few moments longer. Derek finally registered the new scent coming off from the Tybaan. Is that arousal? He'll have to remember this one, if only to stay alert. After what looked to be rather intense internal debate, Jaunt gave out a quick huff and pressed his lips against Derek, who completely froze in shock and confusion. Not only that, but he felt a surge in him, centering from the kiss. Is this what it felt like? To have not a man's, but another person's lips on his own? Derek said the truth earlier. He had questions about his sexuality. He wasn't sure whether to make a firm decision or not, because all he had to go on was the porn he frequented on his computer. And he didn't think that would be sufficient evidence for what team he played for. But this, well, he has his answer now. Until he makes a move on a woman, he's at least bisexual. However, there is another issue that's plaguing him. Jaunt is a Redrak, a rat with a human-like body. As enjoyable as the kiss was, something in him felt revolted that he's allowing this to happen. Some part of his mind still carried the notion that he's a human receiving a kiss from an animal. Jaunt slowly broke the kiss and backed away. The look he had on his face, it seemed, hopeful, as if kissing him would be what was needed to advance their relationship. After staring almost slack-jawed for several moments, the first thing that came to Derek's mind was, I take it you're into me then? Jaunt snorted at first, then soon fell into amused laughter that lasted for a good while. Wiping a joyful tear away, Jaunt answered, I won't lie, Derek. You're probably the most handsome man I've ever encountered. In talking with you, you're sounding like someone I'd like to get to know more. Oh, Derek replied, once again, his mind mentally locking up. This wasn't what he had planned for today. He just wanted to have breakfast before he started planning out on what the hell he's going to do to make this world a better place, not start a relationship with someone he's just met. Then again, Jörn saved his life, took care of him, stayed by his side throughout the entire hell Derek endured. In fact, Jörn had so many opportunities and chances to do whatever the hell he wanted with Derek, but he didn't do anything beyond helping him or caring for him. Derek isn't sure what the people of this world are like, but even by his old world standards, this is someone worth keeping. He just doesn't know right now. Maybe time will tell him, fuck it. You know, Jörn, I'm not sure yet, but yeah, I'd actually like to get to know you better too. He gave the biggest smile Derek has seen yet. I'm glad you do. Let's get back to breakfast, yeah? Eastern Devil's Spine Mountains. Venex, you're going to make a hole if you keep pacing like that, Deviok said with a sigh, slurping up another spoonful of porridge. Sorry, it's just... God, it's actually killing me. Venex sighed with frustration, continuing his pace. I can't stop thinking about what we talked about. The person in Skaffin's amulet. Could it actually be Tarek? Venex, you need to stop this obsession, Deviok said with zero patience. Didn't night soil duty make it clear to you yet? If Lord Skaffin doesn't want to talk about that person, then he doesn't want to talk about it. I know, Venex replied, finally stopping his pacing. I've never wanted anything so bad in my life before. This could be huge. This Tarak person has only been mentioned very few times across the three great lords. But each time he's mentioned, it's very clear how much the lords revere him. Must I repeat myself, Venex? Devio groaned as he facepalmed. If Skaffin doesn't want to talk about it, don't K-King talk about it. But if it's true, think about what we could learn. Venex continued undaunted, sitting next to Devio. Who this Tarak person is, how he inspired our lords to be who they are, where they all came from. Learn the secret to how they've lived for such a long time. Wait, we could actually know if Tarak is alive or not, if he's long lived like they are. I'm talking to a wall, you know. Devio exclaimed, throwing up his hands. I can walk out of this camp, find a big stone, talk to it, and the exact same result will happen. Not being listened to. Devios, I am listening to you, Venex protested. I'm just trying to explain why I think otherwise. Which you can also say, not listening to me. Devio scoffed, returning to eating his porridge. Before Venex could continue, the centurion of the scouting company jogged up to him. That must mean a report. Venex stood up and greeted the centurion. Sir, scouts have spotted Ormel movement to the west of us. The centurion began. This is just a guess, but it looks like one of the Ormel tribes just dominated another. They've reported seeing a few fights between them and a few groups of Ormel repainting symbols on the encampment walls. As of a few minutes ago, a very large raiding party has just left the encampment, destination unknown at this time. Kak, okay, let me speak to Lord Skaffin. Venex hissed, knowing this is trouble. Dashing over to Skaffin's command tent, he quickly yanked open the tent's entrance and walked in. My lord, new report from Kaking Kak, Skaffin roared, shooting out of his bed, stuffing what must be his amulet back under his armor. What? Venex was terrified into silence for a moment, but managed to press on. Report from the scouts. An Ormel tribe just subjugated another and have just sent out a large raiding party. Don't know where to yet. Orders? What? What orders? Skaffin said in bewilderment, spreading his arms. Watch them. Keep an eye on them. Figure out where they're heading. What are you, stupid? I'm sorry, our lord, Venex stammered, already backing away. I'll give the order right away. Once he was outside, Venex promptly closed the tent's entrance again and sprinted away, not wanting to further provoke the great lord by his mere presence. Seeing the scout's centurion again, he relayed the order to him, who then saluted and made his way to his men. Venex pressed his hands onto his knees, doubled over as he started to breathe out his shocked fear. So, is figuring out the amulet thing still worth it? Deviox asked after eating another spoonful of porridge. Venex glared at him in response. Go cock a demon, Reki. Chapter 9. Once breakfast was done, Jörn helped Derek walk around Parnax itself. As they did, Derek realized that he never really got to know the place. Too many things kept happening, he supposes. Derek accompanied Jörn along his rounds of checking up on the village for today. He learned that Nursus was indeed a shop owner, but it seems more than just general goods. Derek spotted some very cool-looking glass artwork in a special shelf behind Nursus's counter. It ranged from statues and figures of various objects and people to really intricate, beautiful works. One piece that caught his eye in particular was a very polished, intricately made figurine of a woman in a graceful pose. Redrac, obviously, but what Derek was focusing on was just how realistic the robe or cape looked. He can't even imagine how much time it must have took for the artist to do that. "A man of taste, I see," Nursus said with a little chuckle, knowing what Derek was looking at. "The finest piece from Danasus yet, hand-sculpted by Cipino himself." "It's beautiful," Derek commented after a moment of finding the words to say. "Cipino is really good if he can make something like that. I can't even imagine what it would take to make something like that." What's even more incredible is that Cipino discovered someone out in the land who remembered how to do such things, Nursus explained, joining Derek in appreciating the work of art. He used to be a blacksmith's son, learning how to forge blades, armor, and other things with metal. He didn't seem to care much for it, so he ended up wandering, finding purpose for his life. That was when he found someone who remembered how the old empire worked glass. "I'm telling you, Derek, the amount of coin I pay for these things, Cipino will be richer than even the emperors of old by the time he retires, if he even does so." When he heard blacksmith, something popped into Derek's mind. "Say, is Danasus the only one with a blacksmith, or does Parnax have one as well?" "Oh, of course we do," Jörn answered. "You only hear about Danasus because that's where everyone goes to if they need something outside their village. In fact, I reckon Brastus is even greater than the one in Danasus." "If it's no trouble, may I meet him?" Derek asked, a faint idea slowly growing in his head. Of course, Hannah and her husband are in need of new tools anyways. Jörn nodded, taking Derek's arm over his shoulders once more. After giving their farewells to Nursus for the time being, they made their way over to the other side of the village, requiring Derek to take a few breaks. He won't lie, it's actual hell just trying to walk some amount of distance here. He's actually starting to wonder if maybe staying in bed all day was the best idea after all. But a blacksmith is the one who makes tools, even weapons if they know how. It's not much, but if Derek can kickstart any kind of positive change, wherever he could, it'll be worth it. A slight distance away from the village center was where the blacksmith was. His house was like any other, the only difference being what looks to be a deck extending out from the side. There, Derek knew what it had. It was a blacksmith's workshop. He can see what looks to be a stone furnace, an array of tools along the side of the house, the iconic anvil a short ways away from the furnace, and various other equipment for the trade. "Brastus," Jörn said as he and Derek approached. Derek saw that there was a small stairway leading up to the deck. To any normal person, it's rather short, but to him, it may as well be Mount Everest itself. "Jörn, hello there," Brastus said enthusiastically, giving a wave, though he soon deflated into concern upon spotting Derek. "Did something happen? Wait, gray fur. Is that the outsider, Derek?" "Yeah, that's me." Derek answered with a sigh, mentally preparing himself for the arduous journey in front of him. As he expected, walking up the stairs ignited a fierce burn in his thighs that nearly killed all rational thought in his mind. But with Jörn's aid, he managed to push on. "I'm glad to see you're okay," the soot-covered Redrac said with a sigh of his own. "I still don't know what's worse. Meeting a Wamel or a demon. Derek will have trouble getting around for a bit," Jörn explained as he helped Derek to a suitable seat. "But the good news is, so long as he gets his rest and we don't push him, he'll be back to normal within 2 weeks at the most." "Good, good," Brastus grinned, his positivity soon returning. "Now then, what can I do for you, Tybon?" "Hannah and her husband needs a new reaper for their field," Jörn began. "The iron on the blade is decaying and the handle is rotting as well. They desperately need it." "What? Did they wait until now to say something?" Brastus exclaimed in shock. I'm surprised we're not getting any tainted food if they let it go that long. Ugh, either way, I'll get started right away. Did Derek hear that right? The iron in the Reaper was decaying, probably meaning rust. If farm tools are using iron, then that means this world must at least be in the Iron Age. Definitely better than the Bronze Age for sure. He'll need to continue keeping an ear open for any more clues as to what level the world's civilizations are at. Then again, he did remember that Urien explained that Abet saved a bunch of books and other sources of knowledge before the Empire collapsed. So with everything that's been said, could they, at least the people around here, are they in the Dark Ages? Has Derek been flung into history, repeating itself with new players? It's clear that the Redrax have formed, by how they're describing it, a Roman Empire that must have been powerful and possibly expansive. It even fell the exact same way by Melfolk barbarian tribes in a demon invasion proving too much for them to hold off. So maybe they're in the early Middle Ages then. The period just after the Roman Empire fell, but before what a lot of people think of. Oh right, Derek here asked to meet you. Urien's statement broke him out of his thoughts. Derek, this is Brastus, the finest blacksmith Parnax has ever witnessed. I wouldn't go that far. Brastus chuckled with modesty. Still, it's a great pleasure to meet you, Derek. I must admit, I didn't think you having gray fur was true when I heard it. Why? Derek questioned with a shrug. Why does me being gray matter so much? It's a very rare color these days, Derek, Urien answered. You can thank the Melfolk for that. Not only that, but depending on where you are, some people even think it's a sign of good fortune. Really? Derek questioned again, feeling somewhat flattered that he could be regarded as a good omen. Why do they think that? Each time that a gray Redrak has been born or sighted, fortune befalls those in their presence. Brastus answered this time. The greatest and most well-known legend involves a village sometime after the Empire's collapse. Demons were swarming the village, infesting it and whatever was around. Many horrors were unleashed there. The demons slaughtered those they fancied or drove good men and women into doing unspeakable acts. Then one day, a gray Redrak was born. Throughout his life, he was untouchable. The demons could not corrupt him, and every time they tried to kill him, something would stop them. A loose wooden board falling at an opportune time, a mere trinket he carried stopping a fell blade. Wanting all of this to stop, the gray Redrak then left his village, promising to bring help. After 5 long days and nights, the gray Redrak returned with what's left of the Empire State Legions, driving the demons away. And for the rest of his days, no other demon dared touch that village again. Shit, how long ago was that? Derek inquired, absorbing what he heard. It's never really certain. Urien shrugged. Some say about 200 years after the Empire's fall, others just before the demons left. I see. Derek nodded as he continued to process the conversation. Remembering why he came here, he decided to change the subject. Brastus, hopefully this isn't a stupid question, but can you make other things besides tools for the fields? It's been a while, but I still can. Brastus nodded after a moment of thought. Hasn't been real need for it lately. What are you thinking of? Derek prepared himself. It's the moment of truth. There's a particular weapon that came to mind, and depending on how Brastus answered, it'll give further clues as to where the world is technologically. How would you consider yourself when making weapons that hurt or kill from a distance? Bows? Give me the proper wood and it's rather trivial. Brastus responded with a shrug, all casual. Arrows as well. What about crossbows? Derek pressed, his anticipation almost gripping his chest. Crossbows? Brastus repeated with confusion. I don't recall what those are. Can you describe them? Shit. As far as Derek's aware of, crossbows came first before guns. So if nobody here knows what crossbows are, there's an extremely high chance that guns haven't been invented, or even gunpowder itself. In fact, if guns were just invented, everybody would be talking about it. The fact that they aren't tells them that either. There's a strange reason why none are around here, or they just weren't made yet. But this is his chance. Again, it doesn't look like much, but every little bit helps. Derek took in a breath trying to word his explanation the best he could. The way I understand it, crossbows are basically an improvement of the bow. Instead of drawing and then holding the arrow with your arms, you instead use a mechanism that holds the drawn bow in place, freeing your hands and arms. And because you aren't forced to keep the bow drawn with your arms, you can actually increase how powerful the shot is. And the final, probably biggest advantage is that unlike with normal bows, where you basically need to grow up with them to be skilled, crossbows only require a little practice to be a good shot. Brastus and even Jörn were deep in thought, no doubt trying to rationalize how it would be done in their minds. And each moment that they took trying to figure it out, Derek stood there in silence, his apprehension starting to grow. It got to a point where he'd be having cold sweats from the sheer, unknowing tension as to if they'll get it or not. I don't see it, Jörn finally said, his words like a dagger through Derek's chest. How would that even work? What's keeping the bow drawn? Derek said it was a mechanism, Brastus stated. The only way I can see it is if it was built into this crossbow itself, but, I might need to think on this for a bit. If there's a way for me to draw it, I might be able to show you, Derek blurted, giving into his fear that they're not getting it. You know, paper or parchment with something I can write with? I think that might be best. Brastus nodded. I'm having trouble seeing it in my mind. Jörn, do you have anything? Yeah, I think I got something for that, Jörn said as he got up. I'll take you back home, Derek, and let you work this out while I get back to my rounds. Yeah? Sounds good, Derek affirmed, slowly standing up. After being supported by Jörn and saying their temporary farewells to Brastus, the Theban and his gray-furred friend soon made their way back to the Theban's estate. Marseillon, Kingdom of Swabia. Artyr woke up. He was in his master bedroom. He has a pretty good idea he didn't get much sleep. Letting out an anxious sigh through his nose, he got up from his lavish bed and began to dress himself for the day. Morning, my love. His wife, Queen Elsabeth, greeted him with a quick kiss on the cheek. You tossed and turned a lot during the night. Did I? I apologize, my sweet, Artyr said, returning the kiss. As I'm sure you've heard, I bore witness to a murder during last night's festivities. I have. Elsabeth nodded, her face grim. The Unter Kaiser, Alfric, right? I hear it was poison. It cannot be anything else. Artyr nodded, taking a seat on his ornate chair. He was just drinking some fine elixir from Camberu, and then he just collapsed. I can't even begin to fathom what his son is going through. Elsabeth sighed, her sky-blue eyes wandering to the window. Do we expect to hear from him today? I have no doubt that news has reached him during the night, Artyr said as he leaned in his chair, crossing his arms. He will grieve, as any good son will do. What I worry about, though, is what he will do going forward. Pain has a way of bringing out the worst in men, especially when it feels as though it was sudden and senseless. Ignoring the possible politics behind it, perhaps being there during Alfric's procession is a good step, Elsabeth suggested, resting a hand on her husband's shoulder. It is, yes. Artyr nodded, gripping her hand softly. But if only it hasn't happened when things are uncertain. I worry that if I offer to give my respects, either the Kronprinz or the Eastern Lords will make it clear I am not welcome there. The Drak folk are proving a rather divisive issue among us. Elsabeth sighed as she moved to take a seat at the edge of the bed. But I've also heard the tones and the voices that our sibling races have spoken with. It seems they view us an embarrassment for even letting it become an issue. Frankly, my sweet, I do not care what the others think of us right now, Artyr stated firmly. Swabia is under dire threat of being split apart. It is our unity brought by Athel himself that is our strength. As soon as we begin falling apart, we'll fall prey to all manner of beast and dark forces lurking beyond our lands. The Ormel have been rather quiet a little after your ascension to the throne, haven't they? Elsabeth asked, looking out the window again. Do you fear that, if they hear of this possible secession, they'll view you as weak and will begin attacking once more? It's who they are, my sweet. Artyr sighed with disappointment. They listen only to strength. They respect us because they believe I am a strong leader. As soon as they hear that some of our kin are moving to procure independence, they view that as me losing my strength to lead, as well as seeing a new, untested tribe to challenge. The ones who live in Athel's shield especially. About that, I've been hearing rumors about a Crimson Redrak, Elsabeth spoke up, facing Ardor again. It seems as though he's slaughtering the Ormal by the score, and by the sounds of it, it's starting to look as though the Ormal may actually fear that creature. Ah, I've heard of the Redrak, yes. Ardor nodded, fetching his memory. As savage and backwards as they are, the Ormal are no weaklings. If this Crimson Redrak is indeed delivering such carnage upon them, as is said, then that Redrak is a very rare warrior. We'll have to watch their journey with great interest. See what becomes of them. Back on topic, what are you to do about the Unterkaiser's poisoning? Elsabeth said as she moved to her dressing station, no doubt to put on her fine jewelry. I've already spoken with Spymaster Jacques before retiring to bed, Artir stated, standing up to resume dressing. Uncovering the unchivalrous murderers is his top priority. If he learns anything, I'll be the first to know. Then it would seem we must endure the most challenging of virtues, Elsabeth sighed. Patience, that it is, my sweet. Artir nodded his agreement, moving to provide another kiss to his wife. As much as I desire to be ready for the Crown Prince, I realize that things are still chaotic for preparation. I'll just have to deal with him when it occurs. Trust my instincts. Remember, love, Elsabeth said as she gripped his wrist. Don't treat him as a rising political enemy. Treat him like a son who just lost his father. I believe that will go a long way towards mending the strain we both feel. That's the plan, yes? Ardor smiled as he softly patted her shoulder. But I thank you for the suggestion. Now, time to deal with this hellfire that awaits me. Good luck, my love, Elsabeth said with a hopeful smile. I have faith that you will guide us in these dark times. Thank you. Ardor returned the smile, tying the half-cape to his neck, and then leaving the master bedroom. As he closed the door, he gave himself a moment to switch from being himself to King Ardor of Swabia. With a cleansing breath, his body language quickly transitioned into strong stoicism. His face soon grew neutral, and then he marched down the hallway toward the throne room. As he got near, the hints of what was to come echoed out the door. It was the Highborn, demanding answers as to what's happening, or no doubt offering their wise counsel. But he does not blame them. Even if it wasn't the Unterkaiser, a successful poisoning of any Highborn is a very frightening event to witness. If someone was willing to orchestrate such a plan, who's to say that the other Highborn aren't next? Especially considering that it was successful thus far, the schemer will grow confident. After passing through the door once the guardsman opened it for him, he was then greeted by the sound of a court servant announcing him, complete with all the illustrious titles he bore. The room grows silent. Once he took his place upon the throne and the servant finished his announcement, the room erupted into a deafening cacophony once more. Have you found the killer yet? Is it just Lord Alfric, or are we next? Why aren't you looking into Duke Gascony? He's always been a violent one. Silence. Ardor boomed his voice, not one of force but of authority. At once the room knew silence again. I understand your fear, dukes and counts. I have already set my best men on finding whoever has done such a dishonorable thing. And this is your king, I promise. As soon as we are convinced we have found the murderer, he will be punished to the full extent of the law. And once we have discovered how they were able to get past our guards' knowledge, we will immediately take steps to ensure it will not happen again. Your Highness, start with Duke Gascony, one of the younger lords spoke up. He's always had such an uncouth temper on him, he'd be the one. Do not listen to your fear, Artir stated simply. As I have said, the best men that I trust are already working to uncover the identity of the murderer. If you truly feel what you say will help, speak to Jacques. I have given him command of the effort. As he expected, the Lord didn't like that answer and quickly silenced his mouth. Little by little, that Lord will learn how politics work. Do we know if the Shadowrunners are involved? Another, older Lord spoke. Artir froze. That is a name that only he and very few of his inner circle know about. It seems there is treachery somewhere in his circle. I don't recall hearing such a name, Artir replied after gathering his wits again. Again, as I've said to the other lord, if you have something you think will help, speak with Jacques. Really? I think you do know who they are. The lord, a male Hamel who has begun to have white in his hair, challenged. They hide in the shadows. They offer services in exchange for information. One such service is murder. Sound familiar, my liege? Artur could feel rage building up in him. This lord is going to incite unnecessary panic. No, it's not. But I find it very interesting that you're aware of such a dangerous organization. I don't suppose you'd be willing to explain who they are to my men. Explain if you've had any involvement with them. As the guards approached, the insolent lord's face turned white. Artur knew what he tried to do. He was going for a gotcha moment to try and humiliate him. But instead, he made a fatal error in judgment, as well as exposing a treacherous liar within his ranks. This hellfire just grew even worse. As the lord was escorted out by the guards, the room rapidly grew into frenzied, hushed conversation. This is what Artur feared. Panic is growing. The highborn are already succumbing to gossip and sharing their thoughts. It won't be long before things become twisted, and true panic starts to be on the rise, especially if the commoners and Drax catch word of this. But then he too grew white when he made a realization. If the Shadow Runners were indeed the ones who carried out the deed, and their price was information, what was sold to make it worth their while? What have the Shadow Runners learned in order to make assassinating not only a high-ranking noble of Swabia, but one who has the public eye worth it? Artur is soon starting to have a bad feeling. His gut is telling him that there's something going on in the shadows, an unseen force manipulating and orchestrating events for some grand plan. He's desperately hoping that this was just a case of some unruly noble, unhappy with Artur's decisions about the issue, taking it upon themselves to solve the problem. Because if it's not, Artur is terrified as to what plans are in store for Swabia. Kriegsberg, this is the moment that the Kronprinz, now Unter Kaiser, feared the most, something he never wanted to happen, for it would officially make it reality. His father's body has arrived. Deep within a church dedicated to Saint Athol, within a small room, there was his father, laid upon a stone altar, hands crossed on his chest, his face peaceful, unmoving, dead. Alfric had spent much of the night letting his emotions run wild within him. Outwardly, he was a silent statue, with only tears a clue as to what was going on in him. Inside, a maelstrom rivaling the strongest of storms brought by the magic winds was roaring. Now he is just silent, outwardly and inwardly. Stepping forward, he lowered himself to a knee and clutched his father's hand. His eyes never once leaving his face, his mind compelled to play out all the various scenes of suffering he may have endured. The shock, confusion, and terror that gripped him in his last moments. Opposite him was his companion, Ginor. Ears flattened, and in mourning, he too took Alfric Sr.'s hand into his. It wasn't long before he couldn't hold it back and began to weep, pressing the hand against his forehead. Alfric wished he could weep. Right now he feels nothing, wants nothing. He is here to spend whatever moments he could with his father before the procession begins. The church priest soon stepped beside him and placed a hand on his shoulder. I am very sorry for your loss, my son. Everything is ready. As soon as you are done, we can begin. Take all the time you need. Thank you, Alfric replied in an empty voice. With a nod, the priest soon vacated the room, granting the Hamel and Wudrak their privacy. I remember when he found me, Ginor began, his emotions racking his voice. I just saw my family, ripped in front of me. I can hear them screaming still, and then they came for me. I never fought so hard in my life before, and right as they put me on the table, I heard a noise. They did too, and then they were killed. It was Alfric, him and the Bergsguard. I still remember the way he looked at me, a man whose own soul was hurt at what he saw. He took me in, and that's when I met you. You were a quiet one for a long while, Alfric nodded. Father told me how he found you. He didn't give me all the details then, but I knew. I still remember how everybody was asking why I was spending time with someone who never talks. I didn't care so long as you were there. I was happy. I never even got to confess, Gnor stated, which earned Ulfric's attention. I never told him that. I was the one who stole his elixir. That was you? Ulfric asked in mild surprise. I thought it was Helga. Always thought she loved it a bit too much. I was just curious is all, Gnor said with a weak shrug. I think it hurts worse knowing I didn't even like it. I don't think Father did either. Ulfric shrugged with a weak chuckle. Think it was only for politics. Always preferred the ones that came from fruit. Oh, Gnor muttered after a moment. You know, I remember one time in Schaum, when I walked in, he was really beating you with words, Ulfric stated after some time of silence. What was that about? I don't think I've ever seen him like that. Oh, it was because I beat him. Gnor gave a small smile with a shrug. He was training me with a blade, and somehow I managed to get a good hit on him. I think what embarrassed him is that he said that if I do get a hit on him, I can have all of the sweet food I wanted for a week. So that's why there was so much all of a sudden. Ulfric chuckled with a half smile. I thought it was a little odd, but I didn't care. I got to have whatever there was. Didn't you get sick one night? Gnor asked him, starting to laugh a little. Oh, absolutely. Ulfric nodded, owning up to it. Ugh. I actually thought I was dying for a while there. Didn't I call for you when it happened? You did, yeah, Gnor replied. I thought you were dying too. I remember just how scared I was. I think I even turned your father white when I ran to him, told him that you were dying while crying my eyes out. Ulfric gave out a laugh. I remember that. I heard him really ripping you a new one the next day. You really put the fear of Athel into him. I did, yeah. Gnor nodded with a little laughing smile. The room fell silent once more. Ulfric didn't know how much time passed now, but now he felt ready to say his final goodbye. Gnor wasn't there yet, returning to tears when Ulfric stated such. Ulfric moved to the other side and comforted his Wudrak friend, willing to wait however long he needed. It would be quite a while before Gnor mustered the courage to give his final goodbye. Giving one last look to the body of his father, Ulfric made a silent, solemn vow. It won't end with him. He will continue his father's dream of carrying on the legacy of the Prommel. He doesn't know how or when, but he'll delve into the ruins of the Prommel. He'll learn their lost secrets. He'll offer his hand in friendship to the Drak people, just as they had done. For they are the Prommel themselves. Their sibling races, the Daemel, the Amel, and the others, they have changed over the innumerable generations since the fall of the Prommel and the rise of the First Empires. But not the Hamel. They are the Prommel, the long descendants of them. They owe it to their ancestors to resurrect their legacy, to return to where they were once before. No, more than just resurrection. To go even further than they had. Excuse me, Kronprinz? A voice interrupted his thoughts as they exited the church. Ulfric spun to see who it was. It was a Redrak of dark brown fur and a rather lean body. Not powerful, but not weak either. Yes, Ulfric answered, both politely as well as being on guard. If you're willing, I'd like to share what I know about your father's end in return for something you know, the Redrak stated. Ulfric could feel emotion once more, and this time, it was indignant rage. Or perhaps you can just tell me and not possess such callous cruelty to use a good man's death for your own gain. Ulfric responded with nigh unrestrained anger. No, something that helps us both. The Redrak sighed before straightening his posture. Perhaps I should explain. The people I work with, we'd like to know about the routes the Melfolk use to transport hunted Drakfolk to their borders. We have a pretty good idea that you'd be the one who would know. If you tell us where to look, we'll share what we've learned about your father. Ulfric fell silent. He didn't know how to respond to that. One side tells him it was wrong that he was approached in such a manner, approached so ... inappropriately. But on the other, what if this Redrak and his people have loved ones that were captured? Time could be of the essence, and he didn't mean to impose himself at such an inopportune time. With a sigh, Alfred made his decision. Very well, he said, but tell me what you know first, and then I'll tell you. I'd like to apologize for the timing of this. The Ridrak bowed. I won't argue with you. This is what we know. King Arthur is currently moving to brand your father's death as a natural one, in spite of the evidence. All at once, every fiber of Alfred's body clenched in incomprehensible wrath. What? We believe that Artyr is fully aware of the potential implications your father's assassination could bring. The Ridrak continued. If announced that it was indeed a murder, he fears that could be the start of a genuine secessionist movement of your people. So he's moving to try and frame it as a natural death, possessing regrettable timing. It was like a bounce. Alfric's rage swelled and grew with such speed as he spoke, and then once he was done, it soon all melted away. A strange calmness, inexplicable peace. Genor, Alfric spoke in a calm, composed voice. Give him what he needs. I need time to think. Oh, of course, Genor nodded, bristling with absolute rage.